CBS Young and the Restless Spoilers. The air in the grand salon of the Newman Ranch was stagnant, heavy with the scent of stale scotch and impending ruin. Victor Newman stood by the fireplace, his silhouette a rigid line of defiance against the flickering embers, though his hand trembled imperceptibly as he gripped his glass. The portrait of him above the mantel seemed to mock the man standing below it, a man who was currently losing his grip on the empire he had built from nothing. "They are circling, Nicky," Victor growled, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the room. "Phyllis and that scoundrel Kane. They think they have won. They think holding Newman Enterprises hostage is enough." Nicky Newman sat perched on the edge of the velvet sofa, her knuckles white as she clutched a silk throw pillow. She looked frazzled, her usual impeccable composure fracturing under the weight of the last few weeks. "It isn't just the company, Victor. It's Lily. The police were here again. Devon is out for blood. He's convinced we've done something to her." "I told you, I had nothing to do with Lily Winter's disappearance," Victor snapped, turning to face her. "It is a setup. Another pawn in their game to break me." "But they don't believe you." Nicky's voice rose, shrill and thin. "And they don't believe me. The press is camped at the gates, Victor. They're calling me an accomplice. They say I'm covering for a monster." The accusations regarding Lily's kidnapping had become a noose tightening around Nicky's neck. Every time she left the state, microphones were shoved in her face, demanding to know where the Winters' heir was. Demanding to know if the Newmans had finally crossed the line from corporate sharks to criminals. She felt cornered, isolated in a house that felt less like a sanctuary and more like a mausoleum. The heavy oak doors burst open, and Victoria marched in, followed closely by a disheveled Nick. Victoria looked immaculate but tense, her eyes darting between her parents, while Nick looked like a ghost of himself, sweaty, pale. His eyes glazed with the chemical haze he'd been trying to hide for weeks. "We need answers, Dad," Victoria demanded, throwing a tablet onto the coffee table. "The board is panicking. There are rumors that you're liquidating personal assets to fight Kane. Is it true? Are we bankrupting the family to save the company?" "You do not question me, Victoria," Victor warned, stepping forward. "I have every right to question you," she shot back. "I've given my life to that company. And now, with these kidnapping charges, if they arrest you, or Mom—" "They won't arrest anyone," Nick slurred slightly, leaning against the doorframe for support. "Dad always fixes it. Don't you, Dad? Just like you fixed the Matt Clark problem. Just like you fix everything." "Shut up, Nicholas," Victor barked. "Don't tell him to shut up." Nicky stood up, her body trembling. The stress of the siege, the reporters, the police, the terrifying possibility that Victor had taken Lily and not told her was cracking her resolve. "He's scared, Victor. We are all scared. You keep telling us to trust you, but the walls are closing in." "I am handling it," Victor roared, smashing his glass into the fireplace. The sound of shattering crystal echoed like a gunshot. "Handling it? Like you handled the past," Nicky screamed, the words tearing out of her before she could check them. The pressure in her chest was unbearable, a physical pain demanding release. "Like you handled the truth about them, about where they really came from." The room went deathly silent. The fire crackled, the only sound in the sudden vacuum. Victoria froze, her brow furrowing. "What?" Victor's face drained of color. He took a menacing step toward his wife. "Nicky." Not another word. But Nicky was past the point of return. The isolation, the fear of prison, the years of carrying Victor's burdens had broken the dam. She looked at her children, her beautiful, damaged children, and the tears spilled over. "I can't do it anymore. Victor, I can't be the keeper of your sins while they accuse me of kidnapping a woman I've known since she was a child. I won't go to jail for this when I've already sold my soul to keep your secret." "Mom," Nick pushed off the wall, his confusion cutting through his drug-induced fog. "What secret? What are you talking about?" "Nicky," Victor warned, his voice a lethal whisper. She turned to Nick, her eyes pleading for forgiveness he hadn't yet realized he needed to give. "You think he's fighting for the company because of legacy? He's fighting because the finances, the trust funds, if they audit us, they'll see the payments." "What payments?" Victoria demanded, her voice icy. "The payments to your biological parents," Nicky sobbed, covering her mouth as the truth retched out of her. The silence that followed was heavier than the one before. It was the silence of a world ending. Victoria took a step back, as if struck physically. Biological. Parents, Mom, we're Newmans. You're our mother. She pointed a shaking finger at Victor. I am your mother, Nikki cried, reaching out. In every way that matters. But Victor, we couldn't. Stop it, Victor bellowed, his authority shattering into desperation. She is hysterical. The stress has broken her mind. Don't lie to them anymore, Victor, Nikki shrieked, collapsing back onto the sofa. The adoption records. The payoffs to the clinic in Europe. It's all in the archives he's trying to hide from the audit. That's why he's terrified of the investigation into Lily. If they subpoena the accounts, they'll find the trail leading back to the people we bought you from. Nick stared at his father, his face twisting in a horrific mix of betrayal and comprehension. The identity he had clung to, the burden and the pride of being a Newman, they are apparent. The son of the great Victor Newman was a fabrication. He wasn't a disappointment to his bloodline. He wasn't part of the bloodline at all. Is it true? Nick whispered, his voice cracking. Victor stood frozen, his chest heaving. He looked at Nick, then at Victoria. For the first time in his life, the great Victor Newman had no answer. His silence was the confirmation. Victoria let out a strangled sound, half laugh, half sob. My whole life, she murmured, her eyes wide and unseeing. Everything I've done, the ruthless business deals, the sacrifices. I did it to be like you, to be a worthy Newman. She looked at her hands. And none of it is real. It is real, Victor insisted, finding his voice. I raised you. I made you who you are. You lied to us, Victoria screamed, the vein in her neck bulging. You let us believe we were born into this. You let us judge others for not being one of us when we were just purchased. We were protecting you. Nikki wept into her hands. We wanted a family. We didn't want you to know you were abandoned. So you bought us. Nick laughed, a hollow, jagged sound. He ran a hand through his hair, his body shaking violently now. And you paid people off to keep it quiet. That's the financial anomaly you've been hiding. It was a different time, Victor said, his voice hard, trying to regain control. I did what was necessary to secure the Newman legacy, to ensure my empire had heirs. Heirs. Victoria spat the word out like poison. Not children. Heirs. Assets. The revelation sent a shockwave through the room that felt physical. The rift was instantaneous and deep. Victoria looked at Victor not with the usual frustration or admiration, but with the cold detachment of a stranger. She looked at Nikki with pity and disgust. Nick, however, was spiraling. The pills in his pocket seemed to burn against his leg. If he wasn't a Newman, then who was he? Just a junkie in a rich man's suit. The pressure in his head was blinding. I need to get out of here, Nick muttered, stumbling toward the French doors. Nicholas, wait, Victor commanded. Don't you dare tell me what to do, Nick snarled, spinning around with a ferocity that surprised even Victor. You're not my father. You're just the man who signed the check. He slammed the doors behind him, disappearing into the cold night air. Nick, Victoria cried out, but she didn't follow him. She turned back to her parents, her expression hardening into a mask of stone. You realize what you've done, don't you? You haven't just lost the company to Kane and Phyllis. You've lost us. Victoria, please, Nikki begged, reaching for her daughter's hand. Victoria recoiled. Don't touch me. I need to know everything. The names, the amounts, the dates. If there is a paper trail, I will find it. And if I find out you silenced people, or worse, to keep this secret. She let the threat hang in the air. You will destroy this family if you dig, Victor warned, his eyes narrowing. The family is already destroyed, Victor, Victoria said coldly. Now we're just negotiating the wreckage. She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving Victor and Nikki alone in the cavernous room. Nikki sat amidst the ruins of her confession, the weight of the judgment crushing her. She looked up at Victor, expecting his rage, but found him staring into the fire, looking older and more defeated than she had ever seen him. You have ruined us, he whispered, not looking at her. No, Victor, Nikki whispered back, wiping her face with a trembling hand. We ruined ourselves. I just finally turned on the lights. Outside, the wind howled through the stables. Nick sat in the driver's seat of his car, his hands shaking so hard he couldn't get the key in the ignition. He pulled the bottle of pills from his pocket. The label had his name on it, Nicholas Newman. A lie. A fiction. He dry swallowed 2 pills, then a third. He needed the noise in his head to stop. He needed the crushing weight of the lie to dissolve. As the chemicals began to hit his bloodstream, he stared at the lit windows of the main house. The financial records Nicky had mentioned, the silencing of those who knew. A dark thought bloomed in his mind, fueled by the drugs and the paranoia. If Victor had paid people off to keep the adoption secret, what else had he paid for? Had Lily found out? Was that why she was missing? The complexity of the cover-up was staggering. It wasn't just an adoption, it was a decades-long conspiracy of silence funded by the Newman fortune. And now, with the authorities closing in on the Lily Winters case, that financial house of cards was about to collapse, taking all of them down with it. Back inside, Victor poured another drink, ignoring the shattered glass on the hearth. He knew what was coming next. Victoria would dig. She was relentless. He had made her that way. She would find the shell companies, the payoffs to the biological parents in Europe, and the hush money paid to the lawyers. But there was one file she must not find, the file that explained why the biological parents had given them up. The file that linked Nick and Victoria's true lineage to a past Victor had buried deeper than any other secret. Nicky wept softly on the sofa, a broken woman in a golden cage. The dynasty was fracturing, the fissures running too deep to patch with money or threats. For the first time, the Newman motto "I will survive" felt like a question rather than a promise. The storm had arrived, and there was no shelter left. The air in the grand salon of the Newman ranch was stagnant, heavy with the scent of old leather and unspoken secrets that seemed to seep from the mahogany walls. Victor Newman sat behind his desk, the silence of the room amplified by the ticking of the grandfather clock. In his hand, he held a frayed, yellowed letter of forgotten correspondence from decades ago he'd unearthed while searching for a trust document in the safe. The handwriting was Nicky's, but the words were cryptic, hinting at a timeline that didn't align, a mistake she had prayed would never come to light during the chaotic early years of their marriage. The seed of doubt, once planted in Victor Newman's mind, did not wither. It grew into a forest of suspicion. He stared at the portrait of his family hanging above the mantel. Nick, Victoria. They bore the Newman name, wielded the Newman power, but looking at them now, through the lens of these gnawing words, he felt a sudden, chilling distance. He needed certainty. The collection process was surgical, a covert operation executed with the same ruthlessness Victor applied to his corporate takeovers. He didn't hire a private investigator. This was too sensitive, too volatile. He did it himself. It started with Nicky. A shared martini in the evening, her hand trembling slightly stressed, she claimed, from the recent turmoil with Jordan and the sobriety struggles. When she left the room to answer a call from the stables, Victor retrieved her glass, sealing it in a sterile bag he'd concealed in his pocket. Next was Victoria. She was in his office at Newman Enterprises, pacing, ranting about the latest Glissade acquisition attempts. She brushed a stray hair from her blazer, dropping it onto the carpet. When she turned to look at the projection screen, Victor's hand moved with the speed of a viper, snatching the strand. Then, Nick. This was the hardest. Nick was already on edge, his face drawn tight with the physical pain of his recent injuries, his eyes glassy, a sign of the pills Victor suspected he was abusing. They met at Crimson Lights. Nick took a sip of coffee, winced, and set the cup down, leaving before finishing. "I can't do this today, Dad," he had muttered, limping away. Victor stared at the abandoned cup, a vessel of truth, and pocketed it. Finally, Adam. He came to the ranch reluctantly, expecting a reprimand about the Connor situation or business strategy. Victor offered him a scotch. Adam drank it quickly, eager to leave. The glass joined the others in the private vault, awaiting the courier from the private genetic lab in Zurich. 3 days later, the envelope arrived. It was thick, heavy, and stamped with the seal of the fictional Genetica Veritas Institute. Victor sat alone in the stables, the smell of hay and horses, usually a comfort, now suffocating. He tore the seal. He read the summary page once, then twice. The paper shook in his hands, a tremor he hadn't felt since his days in the orphanage. Subject: Nicholas Newman. Paternity: 0% match. Subject: Victoria Newman. Paternity: 0% match. Subject: Adam Newman. Paternity: 99.9% match. The world tilted. A roar of silence deafened him. Nikki, the love of his life, the woman he had built this dynasty for, fought wars for, she had lied, not just once, but systematically, for decades. The children he had groomed, the children he had pitted against each other, the children he had loved in his own broken, demanding way, they were strangers. Only Adam, the outcast, the one he had rejected, tormented, and treated as the interloper. Adam was the only blood he had. The irony tasted like ash in his mouth. "Victor, you're frightening me. Why have you gathered us here?" Nikki's voice was shrill, cutting through the gloom of the main living room. She clutched her shawl tight, sensing the atmospheric drop. Victor stood by the fireplace, his back to them. Nick was slumped on the sofa, nursing his leg, looking pale and sweaty. Victoria stood rigid by the window, checking her phone. Adam leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, looking bored and defensive. "Sit down," Victor commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a vibration that made the floorboards hum. "I have a meeting in an hour, Dad," Victoria sighed, though she moved to the armchair. Victor turned. His face was a mask of stone, eyes dark voids. He threw the file onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud that seemed to echo. "For 40 years, Victor began, his voice trembling with a suppressed rage that was more terrifying than his shouting. "I have built a legacy. I have fought gods and monsters to ensure the name Newman meant power, meant family." He looked at Nikki. "And for 40 years, I have been living a lie." "Victor, what are you talking about?" Nikki stepped forward, reaching for the file. "Read it," he roared, the sound shattering the tension. Nikki opened the file. Her eyes scanned the page, and the color drained from her face so instantly she looked like a corpse. She gasped, a strangled sound, and dropped the papers. "No, this is impossible. Victor, these are wrong." "They are not wrong." Victor slammed his hand on the mantel. "Zurich does not make mistakes. I gathered the samples myself." Nick, agitated and in pain, leaned forward. "What the hell is going on? What does it say?" He grabbed the papers from the floor. Victoria looked over his shoulder. The room went silent as the siblings read the verdict of their existence. 0%, Nick whispered, his voice cracking. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and confused. "Dad, what is this?" "I am not your father," Victor said, the words cold, hard projectiles. "Neither of you. You are not Newmans." Victoria laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "This is a joke. It's one of your tests, isn't it? Like the fakerist, like the gaslighting. You're testing our loyalty again. Look at your mother." Victor pointed a shaking finger at Nikki. All eyes turned to Nikki. She was weeping silently, her hand over her mouth. She didn't deny it. The guilt, buried under decades of denial and champagne, was written in the lines of her face. "Mom," Victoria's voice broke. "Tell him he's crazy." I didn't know." Nikki sobbed, collapsing onto the sofa. "There were times, before we were solid. I thought, I prayed." "You prayed," Victor sneered, his lip curling in disgust. "You let me raise another man's spawn. You let me give them my name, my empire." Adam, who had been silent, walked slowly toward the table. He picked up the last page. He read his own result. He looked at Victor, then at Nick and Victoria, a strange mix of shock and dark amusement dawning on his face. "Well," Adam said softly, "this is awkward." "You," Victor said, turning his gaze to Adam. The look wasn't warm, but it was possessive, intense. "You are the only one. You are my only son, my only heir." The revelation hit Nick like a physical blow, harder than the car crash. The identity he had built his entire life around the golden boy, the heir apparent, the one who tried to be better than his father, evaporated. If he wasn't a Newman, who was he? Just a guy with a bad leg and a pill problem. "So that's it." Nick stood up, swaying slightly, the adrenaline momentarily masking his withdrawal symptoms. "You get a piece of paper, and we're done. 40 years of being your son means nothing. Blood is what matters." "Nicholas," Victor barked, "I have valued loyalty above all, and I have been repaid with deceit. You are a living reminder of her betrayal." "I'm your daughter," Victoria screamed, tears streaming down her face. "I ran your company. I sacrificed my marriage, my happiness for you. DNA doesn't change that." "It changes everything," Victor said, his voice dropping to a whisper. It means the foundation of this family is sand, and I am washing it away. He walked over to Adam and placed a hand on his shoulder. Adam stiffened. Adam will take over immediately. Newman Enterprises, the estate, everything. He is the only one who carries the legacy. Adam looked at his siblings. He saw the devastation in Victoria's eyes, the utter defeat in Nick's. For years, he had craved this, his father's validation, the crown. But now that it was here, gifted through the destruction of his family, it felt heavy, suffocating. "Dad, you can't just cut them off," Adam said, though his voice lacked conviction. The lure of the power was intoxicating. "Watch me," Victor challenged. "Nicky, get out of my sight. I will deal with you later." Nicky fled the room, sobbing. Victoria looked at Victor with pure hatred. "You're a monster. You finally got what you wanted. You're alone." She grabbed her purse and stormed out, the click of her heels sounding like gunshots. Nick stood there for a moment longer. He looked at the man he had called dad. He looked at Adam, the brother he had tried to accept, now the usurper. He felt a craving for the pills in his pocket so strong it made his hands shake. "Enjoy the kingdom, Adam," Nick spat. "It's built on a graveyard." He limped out, leaving the door wide open. The weeks that followed were a blur of chaos. The news didn't leak to the press. Victor paid enough to ensure that, but the internal structure of the Newman family was incinerated. Victoria retreated to her home, refusing to answer calls. She drank wine in the dark, ignoring Nate's knocks at the door. The company she had defined herself by was now in the hands of the brother she despised. She felt phantom pains of a limb removed. She was no longer Victoria Newman, the CEO. She was just Victoria. And that wasn't enough. Nick's spiral accelerated. The revelation severed his last tether to responsibility. He ghosted Sharon, ignored Noah's texts. He spent his nights in dive bars on the outskirts of Genoa City, popping pills to numb the physical agony of his leg and the existential agony of his identity crisis. He wasn't a Newman. Maybe that was why he never truly fit the mold. Maybe that was why he was always the disappointment. At Newman Enterprises, the atmosphere was funereal. Adam sat in the CEO's chair, Victor's chair. The view from the top was spectacular, but the air was thin. Executives who had worshipped Victoria now looked at him with veiled contempt, but they bowed nonetheless. He was the sole blood heir. Victor was everywhere, hovering over Adam's shoulder. He was manic, energized by the correction of his legacy but deeply wounded. He spent hours rewriting his will, meeting with lawyers, restructuring trusts. He dissolved the trust funds for Nick and Victoria, redirecting the assets into a new Victor Newman Dynasty trust solely for Adam and Connor. "You must be ruthless, Adam," Victor instructed one afternoon, pouring a drink in the office. "They will come for you. Victoria will try to sue. Nick will beg. You must stand firm. You are the only one who matters." Adam looked at the old man. He saw the pain behind the cruelty. Victor had lost 3 children to gain 1. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" Adam asked, signing a document that effectively evicted Victoria from her seat on the board. "There's no going back." "I have never gone back," Victor said, staring out at the Genoa City skyline. "I look only forward, to the true Newman line." The climax came a month later. Victor summoned them all again, not to the ranch, but to the Newman Tower boardroom. Nick looked worse and shaven, gaunt. Victoria was icy, composed, armed with her own lawyers. Nicky was absent. She had checked herself into a facility in Switzerland, unable to face the wreckage. "I have finalized the restructuring," Victor announced, standing at the head of the table. Adam sat at his right hand. "We're contesting the DNA results," Victoria announced, her voice flat. "We want independent testing." "Do it," Victor shrugged. "The result will be the same. But that is not why you are here." He pressed a button, and the blinds lowered, casting the room in shadow. "I have decided that while you may not be of my blood, you were raised as Newmans," Victor said, his voice surprisingly soft. "And that training, it has value." Nick looked up, confused. "What?" "I am offering you a choice," Victor said. "You, Nicholas, and you, Victoria. You can walk away, keep your names, but lose the fortune, the company, the access. You become civilians." He paused. "Or," Victor continued, "you sign these contracts. You acknowledge Adam as the head of the family. You acknowledge your lack of status. And you work for him. You serve the empire I built. Under the leadership of my true son. The silence was absolute. It was the ultimate humiliation. To stay in the world they knew, they had to bend the knee to Adam the black sheep, the pariah. Victoria looked at Adam. He didn't gloat. He looked tired. You want us to be his employees? Victoria asked, her voice trembling with rage. I want you to be part of the legacy, Victor said, but you must know your place. Nick laughed, a dry, rasping sound. He stood up, leaning heavily on the table. My place. He reached into his pocket, fingering the bottle of pills. He looked at the contract. He looked at his father. You know what, Victor? Nick said, dropping the dad for the first time. Keep it. Keep the money. Keep the empire. Keep your true son. He turned to walk away, but his leg buckled. He stumbled, catching himself on a chair. Adam shot up. Nick, don't touch me. Nick snarled, pushing Adam away. I'm not your brother. Remember. He limped to the elevator. I'm done. I'm finally free of you. Victoria watched him go. She looked at the contract. Power. The influence. It was her drug, just as the pills were Nick's. She couldn't walk away. She couldn't be a nobody. Slowly, with a shaking hand, she picked up the pen. Victor smiled, a cold, satisfied expression. Good girl. Adam watched her sign, feeling a knot of nausea in his stomach. He had won. He had everything he ever wanted. He was the king of the Newman Empire. And he had never felt more like an orphan.